one. Jim Hagedorn joins us running for Congress 2016 once again against Tim Walz. Well, Jim, you're going to try it again, aren't you?
Well, yeah, in 2014 we were on the ballot. I won a pretty late primary and only had 10 weeks to go on the general election, and yet we were outspent 6-1, and we got 45.7% of the vote, the highest total against Walz since he's been in office. We won here in Brown County. I want to thank the people for their votes, and we're going to start a little earlier, keep working harder, build our organization, and do our best to finish the job in 2016.
How are you going to go about doing that? What's going to be the biggest thing for you to winning this election this time around?
Well, we got to continue meeting the people. I'm going to get outspent, hopefully not by as much as we were last time, but the key is to get out and shake hands, meet people, get yourself known. We start with a very strong name ID, right around 80% across the district, and we're going to keep building that up. I have to raise more money, so if there are people out there that want to support our campaign, we sure could use the support. Go to jimhagedorn.org and contribute. And also to try to build relationships with the national people, the Republican National Congressional Committee, people in St. Paul, to make sure they understood that this is a vulnerable seat for the Democrat incumbent, and we can take it back in 2016.
The big thing in your eyes, what's wrong with America? Why are you running?
Well, ever since the congressman's been in Washington, it's been almost a decade, really, by every key indicator, things are worse. And you look at our economy is stagnating. We have the lowest job percentage, workforce percentage since Jimmy Carter, and he delivered us an economic plague of biblical proportions. And wages are flat. People are hurting out there. It isn't as good as people think. The stock market's being propped up. If it weren't for that, people would really recognize it. So I think the government is too intertwined in business. We have too many regulations, too many big government programs. We have to kind of weed out that government in order to allow businesses to expand and prosper and hire people and help working Americans. Working Americans are struggling, paying a lot for their disposable incomes are shrinking, and we've got to help them. Another thing we have to do is defend the country. The first responsibility of anyone in Washington, D.C. in a federal job like this is to defend the United States and protect the American people. We're not doing a very good job. Congressman Walz, President Obama have an open borders policy. They're allowing this country to be flooded by people we don't know their identities. And also we have very lax standards when it comes to immigrants coming from countries that happen to be in the Middle East, North Africa, folks with radical attitudes. And we're seeing that come home to roost. In Minnesota now, the U.S. attorney here, President Obama's U.S. attorney, says that Minnesota has a terrorist recruiting problem. And we do. And we've got to protect the American people and defend them from Islamic terrorism.
How do you do that, Jim? How do you go about what would be, say, the first thing you would do to try to stop that?
Well, there's several things. First of all, we need a foreign policy in the Middle East that isn't going to turn things into chaos as it has under President Obama. The radical Islamists are rising up. The Christians are being slaughtered. Now we have these ISIS and other characters that are kind of moving towards the United States, trying to train people, trying to get them involved in terrorism. But mostly we have to make sure that people coming into our country are properly screened for radical attitudes, that we don't allow this open borders and very liberal refugee and asylum program. So I think they need to be revisited. We need to make sure that people are assimilating, they're speaking the language, they're self-sufficient, and that they're not going to be prone to jihad. And that's just not happening under this administration. It's really chaos in the Middle East, and that's starting to come into the United States. And frankly, it only takes a handful of people. Think about 9/11, think about the Boston Marathon, think about Major Hassan down there in Fort Hood. Only takes a handful of people to kill a great number of Americans, to wound people, and to change our way of life and to hurt our economy.
All right. Well, speaking of economy, your thoughts on it? Is it going good, bad? What would you do to fix it?
Well, again, I think, when I was growing up, we used to walk the bean fields, and the younger people don't even know what that is anymore. But we'd go out there and pull the weeds so that the bean could have a proper nutrition, could have proper sunlight, get enough water. The weed wouldn't crowd out the plant. And I think in government we have to do the same thing. We have to get in there with regulatory reform to pull out these extra regulations that are hampering business and driving up costs. We have to, I think, update and replace these big government programs like Obamacare, which are stifling economic growth and having people working part-time jobs. And then we need tax reform, tax simplification to make sure our tax code is updated so we're competitive in a business sense, and so the American people can take their money and spend it the way they see fit, not the way the Washington politicians and the bureaucrats tell them to. So there are a number of things that I would do and promote in Washington that I think would be positive for the economy, and those are all things in opposition to what Congressman Walz is doing out there, supporting President Obama, voting for the big government programs, and supporting the EPA and these big government agencies that are stifling growth and opportunity for working Americans.
You know, that almost kind of ties in with agriculture too, doesn't it?
Well, what's going on in agriculture, I'm concerned. Crop prices are low. The costs for the farmers are still high. I see a lot of, a softening in the agriculture economy, and we have to be very careful because if farmers get into trouble and they end up selling out, usually bigger and bigger operators buy that land, and they're not bad people, but we want to keep the land in as many hands as possible so we can continue to have smaller communities and rural areas to flourish, to sustain our way of life. One of the major issues in Washington on this that every farmer should be cognizant of is the so-called death tax, and that's the estate tax, and we want to make sure, I want to get rid of that because we want to be able for farmers to pass their land down to future generations and to be able to continue the family farming. Congressman Walz just voted for the death tax again here a 3 weeks ago. He's on the wrong side of farmers on that. He's a part-time advocate for farmers. I'd be a full-time advocate. We all understand the need for death and taxes, but they shouldn't be in that order.
And of course, you're speaking of agriculture. You're thinking of the family farms. That's family values. That's where the especially this area here. That's a big thing. That's really becoming a hot topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Brown County always very pretty conservative, traditional. I'd say this is the part of the area where traditional values are still valued. And again, Congressman Walz and I have a little difference of opinion. I think about a week ago, he voted for a bill that would allow abortions in the 7th, 8th, 9th month of pregnancy. Even the liberals think that that's wrong. By that point, you should have figured out we shouldn't be killing 7-pound babies. I'm on the other side. We need to protect innocent life, and that means the unborn, that means the elderly, that means the disabled, and of course people with special needs. And that's the type of values that I would take to Washington on behalf of the people.
It's going to be a long campaign, isn't it, for you?
Well, we'll keep working and organizing and raising money, and it's just a little earlier than normal. But this is when a lot of decisions are made at the national level and state level as to which races are winnable, which races are vulnerable. And I've showed them, hey, we ran a very short campaign and got outspent by a great deal, but we were right there within striking distance. We can take this seat back for the Republican Party in 2016.
Okay, wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right, Jim Hagedorn.